And I just want to jump right in because today a clip from Majority Report jumped out at me and I had to address it. It's one of those clips where ideological belief absolutely overwhelms common sense. What they're doing here is they're mocking an interview on Fox Business where they are discussing the possibility that workers may not return to the workforce or may not be seeking employment because of the extra money that's being paid in unemployment benefits. And of course, because it's coming from the right, it's, Wall Street, Republican, blah, blah, blah. But the first clip is a killer because he's actually arguing against a point nobody's even making. Take a look.
And again, it's also showing an incredible ignorance about what unemployment insurance, who qualifies. You cannot quit and get unemployment insurance.
So she's not saying people are going to leave the workforce. She's saying that the extra money, the extra $600 per week, will discourage people from going back to work. That's the argument she's making. Nobody's making the argument that people are going to leave the workforce en masse. Here's the clip where the actual discussion takes place.
But here is Maria Bartiromo basically letting her ignorant flag fly.
Think about this paycheck program, Richard, because there's some criticism about it, certainly from Senator Lindsey Graham, among others, who's going to be coming up on the show later on, who has said, look, in some states, this flat $600 that are being given to workers, in some states, it will mean that the worker is making more money because depending on where the minimum wage is, the worker is making more money to stay home then he or she would be making on the job. And that's going to hurt productivity, and that's going to hurt any sort of enthusiasm to come back on the job. Why should I go back to work if I'm making more money staying home?
That's ridiculous. Look, people define themselves by the work that they do.
Pause
and if you give workers money,
let me give you what the proper answer is. That's ridiculous. 17 million people have lost their jobs that we know about right now. It's probably 22 million. What job are they going to go back to over the next 6 weeks, you idiot?
So my question is, and I got a couple of questions here, but first and foremost is why is it that it is now worth more to lose your job than it was before coronavirus? Why is it that the guy who lost his job 6 months ago was perfectly fine on state benefits, and now because we have this coronavirus happening, and he can't go out to eat, he can't go to restaurants, a lot of superfluous spending that was taking place probably before coronavirus, that doesn't exist anymore, but for some reason, we need to put an extra $600 a month, $600 a week into people's pockets in unemployment benefits. So I don't really understand that you lose your job now and now somehow it's worth more. But the second is, how is this a disingenuous or how is this an inaccurate argument? Because if you look at the 2008 financial crisis and the incredibly slow economic recovery afterwards, you have to look at the fact that as the economy started to stabilize and as jobs started to come back, the unemployment rate stayed persistently low. But more important and more significant to this particular argument is that the labor force participation rate stayed low. And that is specifically what we're talking about here. That is specifically people not going back into the workforce. This is people not looking for work. So it's really hard to say there's no correlation between extended unemployment benefits and persistent unemployment and people not going back into the workforce. We extended the unemployment insurance to 99 weeks after the 2008 financial crisis. And you could watch and you can go back and look at the chart yourself. The labor force participation rate stayed low and didn't start recovering until those benefits started to wear out. So it correlates very strongly, and it's not a disingenuous argument. This isn't just a Republican blah, blah, blah thing. Here's an article from a story where a small business owner was interviewed. This is the headline from that article. Where a small business owner who's probably very familiar with the local labor market is expressing those exact same concerns about having to compete with these higher benefits when they are able to reopen and they do need to bring staff back. And you may ask what right-leaning or right-wing magazine or whatever this came from. It actually came from NPR. This isn't some right-wing conspiracy or Republican conspiracy that elevated elevated unemployment benefits where people are making more to stay home doesn't discourage people or discourages people from re-entering the workforce. This is a valid concern amongst small business owners. This is a valid concern amongst economists. This is something that we should be discussing. So here's the thing. In the next clip, there's just something that gets thrown out a lot, and it's just not true.
No one says anything when we give big loans to Jamie Dimon or anybody else. Give that worker that money. They'll spend it. They'll create demand. That demand will help us keep the economy going again.
People yelled and screamed about the Wall Street bailout. It was incredibly controversial. The idea that, oh, nobody says anything when we give Jamie Dimon or these billionaires money. Come on, people. 2008 wasn't that long ago. We remember and the outcry was very justified. As a libertarian, I strongly oppose Wall Street bailouts. I strongly oppose the TARP program in general. I thought the big banks should have been broken up, the toxic assets, handled through bankruptcy, and the good assets sold to smaller regional banks, and that business and these large banks that put themselves in this situation should have just been dissolved. I'm not trying to relive the 2008 crisis here, but to say that nobody says anything when we give these billionaires or we bail out Wall Street, nobody says anything, that's just a disingenuous statement. And let's not forget that Senator Obama at the time voted for the Wall Street bailout. So let's not get revisionist here and make sure that we remember that this was a incredibly bipartisan thing. There's a reason I'm a libertarian, and it's because there's really no variance between the two parties when it comes to these kinds of things. Because remember, Senator McCain suspended his campaign so he could run back and vote for the Wall Street bailout. And of course, then Senator Obama voted for it as well, and George W. Bush signed it. So everybody's on board, but I would say that the fact that if you're going to say there was no outcry, I think you had very conservative Republicans. Of course, a lot of the Democrats and libertarians were screaming that this was nothing but a Wall Street bailout and it was corporatism and it was terrible. So it's just a disingenuous thing to say. It gets thrown out there a lot. I just wanted to throw that in there because we need to make sure that thought process doesn't go unchallenged. Most people aren't for corporatism. So the next couple of clips are disgusting and ignorant, and they expose leftist elitism so clearly and obviously. I can't believe the words came out of his mouth. And first, we'll give you the setup.
For this, like there's no option for people to go back to work. This is just bizarre.
And now I'll be an elitist while at the same time defeating my own argument.
I think that's true. It's also, there's no work right now. there's not like, you're not going to go out and find like a ton of work other than, I guess the idea is like, we want more people to go in and work in the Amazon warehouse, or we want people to, clean the bedpans in the hospitals and risk getting infected. I mean,
so let me just say to every person working in a warehouse, in shipping, in an area that is literally being described as the front lines, keeping the supply chain moving and delivering needed essentials all over the country, your work is apparently not worth getting off of the couch for. Too bad you didn't get laid off, I guess. And thank you for showing up every day and doing your job and getting needed and essential supplies to people who can't leave their house. And also another thank you to the CNAs, the orderlies, and every single person working in support roles in hospitals across the country and all over the world for the critical work you're doing in support of the doctors and nurses. Unfortunately, leftist elitists also think you'd be better off sitting at home. He's also making the very point Republicans are making. He's defeating his own argument. He's literally saying that you shouldn't go. Why would you go work at Amazon or at a warehouse or UPS or the Postal Service or one of these places that's hiring incredibly fast right now because the shipping demand has gone up so much? That's not worth going to work for. Why would you go work at a hospital and empty bedpans and do those kinds of things? Why would you take one of those jobs? You're better off sitting at home and collecting your massive unemployment check. He's defeating his own argument. But more importantly, and I got to go back to this, to denigrate people working to denigrate warehouse work and to denigrate support work in hospitals at a time like this when we're literally facing a medical crisis where elderly people are dependent. People who are elderly, people who are suffering from underlying conditions are literally dependent on people working in warehouses and shipping out essential supplies, where we are concerned about our healthcare system being overrun. To denigrate warehouse workers and the work and what they're doing, and to denigrate the work that's being done by hospital support staff is disgusting. And I would hope that he will issue some kind of an apology or retraction for that ridiculous statement. And I'm not one of these, everybody owes an apology for everything type of people. I'm not the Pitchfork Nation. But what a disgusting and elitist opinion. What a horrible thing to say. And it defeats his own argument. As he sits here and calls everybody else stupid, it defeats, literally is the argument that's being made that he just called stupid a few minutes ago. So I wanted to take a few minutes. This one just, like I said, jumped out at me. As you can see, it got the blood boiling a little bit. And I wanted to just check in and share this with you. It'll also be on the podcast, Brian for Liberty, on Spotify. And I will get that thing out here as soon as I can. Thank you for stopping by. If you like the content, please take a look at some of my other videos. If you like what I have to say, please subscribe, share, like the page, whatever the case may be. Get involved and leave a comment. And thank you very much. And as always, we will see you next time.